welcome to the show, Amy Childs. It is so fabulous to have you on the Naked Ambition podcast today. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
We've been super excited about having you. We spoke about this a little while ago, I think, Amy, and it's just, I think, such a critical time to be talking to leaders like yourself at the moment. So we've been super excited about having this conversation for a few weeks now. I want to give a shout out to everyone who's joined us live today. Thank you so much. It's really great to have you on. We are, of course, the Naked Ambition podcast, where we speak with the people who are making a difference in tech, innovation, design and leadership all across the world. And Amy Childs, you are absolutely one of those people. Just to give everyone here a little bit of background about who you are, I'll give a little quick bio. So you've been at Momentum for 4 years. You are currently the managing director. And in that time, you have grown the customer base by over a third. You've driven a major digital transformation, which is awesome. You've improved the customer experience as part of that, created all kinds of efficiencies. And just recently, you and the team won gold in the Melbourne Design Awards for the environmentally friendly activity-based working space that you created for Momentum here in Melbourne. So not bad for 4 years, Amy.
No, it's been a hell of a ride, and I think that's the beauty about working somewhere like Momentum. It's sort of that perfect size where you can really make a difference, and you can just see it in front of you. And I think that's probably why, I'm so passionate about working there, and I just love it.
That's so good. I think that's so clear as well. But anyway, let's dive into how you're going. How are you at the moment? It's like a hell of a lot going on out there. It's crazy times for leaders. How are things going with you?
Look, I think I'd describe it as I'm on the roller coaster. Like some days I'm at the top and I'm like, I've totally got this. This is fine. And then the next day I'm kind of hurtled to the bottom of that roller coaster. And I'm like, oh God, how am I going to get through this? And I think that's just everybody, whether you're a leader, whether you're just starting out in your career, whether you've been in your career forever, whether you're a board member, it's such a weird time. And, all the things everyone talks about, super grateful to have a job, super grateful to be, in the position that I'm in, but everyone's just in a grind. And I think it's hard to keep your spirits up. And for someone like me who, I plan, people that know me well will be chuckling listening to this. I plan everything. I'm very, very organized. And I think that's what I call the COVID curse. Is for those that don't go with the flow that easily in life, this is actually an extra layer of like the control freaks are freaking out because you just have no sort of milestone. And I think for leaders in particular, we're all used to growing up, and even as children and people in society, we have a goal. So, you save this much money and you can buy a house, or you save this much money and you buy a car, or you get to this goal weight and you buy that outfit, or whatever the thing may be. I kind of feel at the moment, I don't know what the goal is. So it's kind of hard to work towards it and to bring everybody along. And I think that's, for me personally, my struggle that I'm sort of being quite vulnerable with my team about at the moment. Is I don't know what good looks like. Is it 200 cases? Is it 300 cases? Is it 20 cases? Is it no cases? What does that look like? And what does life like that after that look like for us? And so I think that's a real struggle, because people are looking for direction. They're looking to leaders for, what are we going to do? Are we still going to do this initiative? Are we still going to follow through with the strategy this year? Like all these different questions. And it's really hard to answer that because it's really hard to plan.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a summary, and not all my feelings, but it's just kind of this, I'm stuck is probably the way I'd describe myself.
Yeah.
And that's, for me personally, is very, very challenging. And so, I'm sort of leaning pretty hard on my team to help me unstick myself from that feeling. And I think that's partly the conversation we're having a lot at the moment around that and sharing that feeling. And I think the more you can express it, the kind of easier it is, and don't kind of bottle it up and hold it all inside. So that's probably a summary of how I'm feeling. I've got all the usual things that many others are contending with. I've got a little boy at home who I've played school teacher to very unsuccessfully. And I think, I've now been at home this week marks my 6th month at home. So Momentum, we pulled the trigger pretty early on sending people home. I can recall the meeting, the 27th of February. I pulled the whole leadership group together, so every leader in the business, and I stood in the boardroom and I just said, team, like people stopped showing up for work because they were scared. And I just said, team, if you want to go home and be home, just be home. Like, that's cool. Like, you do what you need to do to feel like you can get through this. And I never imagined during that speech that we'd be here still, for some people now, 7 months later, running our lives via a screen.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy times. So much in that, Amy. So tell me, talking about that, your leadership style. So you said, like, people who know me will be kind of chuckling at this, that, it's that relinquishing control, and that's right. For leaders and a lot of people. So like, how are you handling it? Tell us, like, what are some of the things that either you, like, when you go there, what are you doing about it? How are you getting through?
Yeah. So for me, I've spent a lot of my time focusing, my sort of central to my leadership style is people's wellbeing. So my whole kind of vision around why I do what I do and kind of why I'm a leader is because I actually fundamentally really care about wellbeing, and it can be in whatever context. So, sure, I work for an energy company, but I could do this. I've worked for health insurance before. I've worked in finance before. Yeah. And I guess the signature style of the Amy Childs leadership experience is very much that that people are the center of wellbeing for me. So I've gone to that as my central point to help me get through. So I've focused all my energy on what can I do to help my team get through this as a team, so that we can keep kind of on the straight and narrow of what we need to deliver, but also just to provide space for people to be okay. And so examples of that, particularly from Momentum, like I put a program in place for people which was called Take 6 over 6. So as we went into the second lockdown in Melbourne, I said to people, if you take 3 days annual leave, I will gift you 3 days of special leave. Wow. So that we can reduce the amount of time that people are feeling like they've got to be on the screen and being engaged. And I mean, that is just the amount of feedback I've had on that. It's just been off the charts. People are like, that's exactly what I needed. And that sort of like got us through what is now stage 3. Yeah. During stage 1, the biggest thing I thought about was people are moving from a great office environment to a home office with no screens, no chairs, like people weren't set up to work from home. We were very fortunate. We did a lot of work last year to have everybody on laptops and things like that. But we sent care packages and mobilised, second-hand chairs, and we got screens home to everybody who needed them delivered, and sort of took care of that ergonomic aspect for people. So that's kind of what people needed for phase 1. For phase 2, it's actually time to just be, and there's nowhere to go and there's nothing to do in Melbourne, but at least you're not trying to work and trying to answer calls. So what people probably don't appreciate about our business is, a lot of it, like 200 out of my nearly 400 folks are what I call a frontline worker. So either taking customer calls or dealing with billing. Those folks don't have the same liberty that you and I have, where if I have a horrible meeting or a tough time or I'm feeling down, I can go for a walk around the block whenever I feel like. When you're on a rostered work call, you can't. And so that weighs on me, like I can't, it just weighs on me really heavily. So those are all the things that we sort of have worked on with the team, and my team have been amazing. Like I come up with these crazy things, like literally, I'll come with it at 8 o'clock and by 9:30 it's out and we've done it and we've executed it, and they're all trying to sort of keep up with me. But they're amazing because they jump on board and make these things happen. So whilst, they're in it themselves, but those types of things I think is how I've sort of used my control, my need for control, my need for planning. I've invested all that energy into the well-being of people, and God, I'm just like, that's keeping my cup full at the moment, really kind of helping me get through, because I feel good as best as I can, I guess, that I'm doing everything I can for the people who really need it in our business.
So that's that control what you can, but I mean, it sounds like you say it's all linked to that style of leadership that is inherently Amy Childs. That is, it's about you really, I guess it's the empathy coming to the front, but it's like, what do people really need right now?
That's
and then how can I come up with an idea that could deliver to that?
And it's contagious. Like, that's the thing you'll find. So, I had folks ringing me during the first lockdown going, oh, Amy, we can't read another email or look at another bloody webinar about something. Like, who wants another webinar in their life? Can we do a really fun video? And so they delivered this amazing program internally, which was just interviewing people around the business called Quarantine. And they ran it like a current affairs show. The team just did it all by themselves, over Zoom, recorded it, produced it. And those are the types of things when you just give people the freedom and the time to be creative, like where people were bidding for stories on it. And, people got to take the mickey out of me. Things like questions people asked was, what's your peak and what's your pitch, which is a really crazy thing to ask a Kiwi to say, because in an Australian business, everyone, of course, loves the Kiwi saying hit and peak. It never sounds good. So, lots of sort of things like that gave people laughs and kind of made them feel connected to the culture. Because my biggest concern about COVID, the headlines are like, office towers are dead forever and no one's going to go back to the city. And, to be honest, I call a bit of bullshit on that. I think maybe for the first 3 weeks, we all thought it was amazing to, lounge around at home and wear Ugg boots and wear your tracksuit pants to the Zoom meetings and things. But now, like, every single person I talk to, male, female, is like, I would do anything to put on a crisp shirt, a nice suit, do my hair nicely, and go to an office and actually have a space where I can collaborate with colleagues, see my local coffee shop that I used to see every morning. Like, there's connections that people have, and there's that kind of feeling of culture that you have when you walk into an organization that you just cannot replicate as well online. So I'm not saying it's all back to that, but equally it's all not back to where we are today. I think there's going to be a really awesome blend that's going to come forward from here. And I'm really thrilled, because we as a business had a vision to have this blended kind of distributed workforce. Was what we embarked on as a transformation journey last year. And we started with a physical environment, and then this year was all about the leadership capability to be able to lead distributed teams, because that's not easy. Like, it's really easy to pull a bunch of people in a room and get around a whiteboard and nail it. But you have to be a lot more thoughtful as a leader when you're trying to run teams in a distributed fashion. So, we'd already planned to sort of do that work this year, and now sort of COVID could have been the gift that's allowed me to kind of accelerate that transformation now, because I'm like, now Rome's burning on this. We actually need to really mobilize around, we don't have the luxury of time. We need to be ready for when we get out of lockdown in Melbourne to be able to move and transition our leadership style of the business into this more distributed space. So, that's, I think, another huge area of opportunity for leaders, because my observations of folks is people have just moved the traditional office environment to the home environment, and it's killing people. Like, I talk to so many people who are like, oh, I can't believe Momentum's doing this, or I can't believe Hydro Tasmania's doing this, when we're working 13-hour days, sort of chained to our desks and replicating back-to-back meetings on Zoom. I mean, that's a recipe for disaster.
And there's so much, again, like, it keeps on coming up. I can hear there that how seriously you're taking well-being. Like, we had a bit of a giggle there where you're like, oh, I can't wait to put on the shirt, or in our case, our loud jackets. We're desperate to get out there and do this, but there's something really serious that sits behind that, obviously, as well. It's that this isolation is really not a good way for people to live beyond work, and it's the responsibility that you clearly have as a leader. You're shouldering that as part of, how you set them up for life, really. Yeah,
of course. And I think there's, people can sort of, I know I'm not trying to sort of say, it's all about the clothing and things like that. No. But well-being for people is the full picture. So it's feeling fulfilled in terms of what you do. It's feeling at peace with yourself in terms of where your head's at and your mindset. But physical appearance is also a component of well-being. So taking care of yourself, eating well, drinking plenty of water. The big focus that we're looking at now as the team at Momentum, like the pulse checks and things that are coming through, the biggest thing people are worried about in my team right now is the nutrition. So people are saying, I'm cuddly, I've put on my winter coat, I've sort of chucked on 5 kilos and I'm feeling terrible. And I know that myself, if I'm carrying too much weight, it affects me in a way that it's not a vanity thing. I just don't feel good. I don't feel sharp, and I don't feel on top of it. And so that's another huge component of this situation that we're in now. That's important. So we're putting some focus on that now as a team. I'm looking at bringing a nutritionist on board and looking at giving people at Momentum access to that, so that they can have an opportunity to just have a bit of a review, like, make some conscious decisions around what they're choosing to eat. And that's got nothing to do with selling electricity and gas, but it's got everything to do with making sure that the people that are working with us are in the best condition they can be in, so that we get the best result for the customer, because ultimately that's what we're here to do. And I think, many people don't appreciate this, but we're not Woolworths, and we're not Coles, and we're certainly not nurses and doctors and working in that front line. But the folks in my team are actually working on the front line. I'm not ashamed to admit, I took a call from a customer early in this crisis, and my only response to him was I had to cry. That's the only thing I could do. He was so upset. He's lost a very, very profitable business. He had a very big outstanding debt with us that he couldn't afford to pay. Lost, something like 80 of his staff no longer employed. And he was so distraught on the phone that my only response to him was to cry with him. That's the only thing I could do. That's just, I get one of those on occasion, and I'll take those calls, but my team are taking those every day at the moment. Every day, small businesses in Australia are struggling at the moment, and it's very, very difficult to be able to help. I'd love to say, let's everyone get free energy. I mean, that would make, that would be amazing, but I can't do that. And so that's the other layer to this complexity, is you've sort of got your staff well-being and everyone trying to sort of keep it together, but you've also got your customer. And the stories are heartbreaking. Like domestic violence, we take our obligations very, very seriously around managing domestic violence. We've got big obligations as energy retailers around protecting customers in this situation. And, that's another big challenge for me as a leader during this. It's not just my customers that are living those situations. I have staff as well. And so, people are like, oh, just work from home. It's actually just work from home. It's actually not possible for everybody that works for you. And so you need to provide, personalised attention to those people and work out how you're going to help them keep their job, keep them safe, and make them feel protected through this, which is something that I know many leaders are talking about at the moment, around the struggle of that, which has been really, really tough, and quite a big, because not everyone lives in the same circumstances. So, so that's another kind of a little hidden thing that sits in behind there, and the customer struggle is really real in that as well. So, people losing their jobs and having to call up an energy company and say, I can't afford to pay my bill. I mean, how humiliating is that, to have that conversation with somebody? So, for me, that's why the well-being piece is so connected to the customer, because if my team are feeling well and feeling on top of it, then they're able to offer that empathy and that help and that support and that customer experience, which we really treasure. So, so that's sort of a bit of, kind of to give you a bit of a picture of the things that we've been going through as a business.
I want to get into some of that there, because you've talked about a couple of themes, that, because I know you speak to a lot of leaders yourself in your role, but also outside. Like, what are some of these conversations? You've mentioned well-being in there. We've talked a little bit around space. We've talked about, how we're dealing with some of these changes, and even leadership style and how it's challenging some of that. What do you think are some of the other big themes that are really coming up for leaders right now?
I think for people, what they are seeing, almost, I sort of describe it as like when two oceans meet. So, I swing in to be a millennial by about a month. Like I still proudly call myself a millennial. It's a bit dodge. Like I'm right on the borderline, but
we'll take it.
We'll take it. That's right. And I think, the millennial style of leadership is different. So, and I'm generalizing, and I hate generalizing, because a lot of things get generalized about millennials that really irritates me, because we're not all spoiled brats, but there is this style of leadership which is quite it's quite equitable. So we try and, certainly for me, I try and make sure things are very fair. Everyone's equal. It doesn't really matter what your role is in the organisation. I kind of don't really observe hierarchical structures. I just don't really think that gets the best out of people. And then you've got a more experienced, kind of more old school traditional style of leadership, but with heaps of experience. And so what I'm observing is this really interesting learning off each other like I haven't sort of seen before. So millennials typically can sort of say, well, we're new and modern and this is the way we do things. And, you know, some more of the traditional leadership can sort of roll their eyes a bit at that and go, oh God, they'll work it out. I think now there's a real meeting of the minds, because when the acid is on, because this issue with COVID is not just around wellbeing and staff, it's actually, there's heavy financial and real like business problems that some folks have been around the block before on, because they've just had more time on the earth, Fiona. Like that's, and so those I see that kind of leaning in, and that like, let's get together and let's talk about some of these problems, which is quite awesome to see. It's almost like guards have been dropped on both sides to kind of learn off each other, which I'm enjoying. And there's sort of respect and learning around what, you know, people have done to respond to different things, because some businesses are booming. Like, you know, if you're selling alcohol in certain cohorts of Australia, you're doing very well. If you're online, you know, retail online, you're doing very, very well. So, you know, if you're in anything like food serve, like in the food space, you know, that's all sort of flying, and then others aren't. So it's kind of helping people. Those sort of folks are almost humble about their success, because they're almost embarrassed. I'm noticing kind of almost not embarrassed, but they're just feeling uncomfortable about being so successful in such trying conditions. And so, which is really nice to sort of see that there's that kind of awareness around being humble, and being mindful of the circumstances we're in, which I think's a really nice thing to see around leaders and businesses. And I think the other big hope for me out of this that I really hope emerges as a theme is something around businesses doing good for customers. So I think as a society, we love a beat up. You know, we love to, you know, I mean, I work in energy. No one loves to beat up energy more than, you know, people love to beat up an energy company. And the reality is, you know, I sit on the Australian Energy Council board, and I work, you know, on that board with some phenomenal leaders of energy businesses who have been in the energy industry for a very long time. I can learn a lot of those people. And, you know, if you read the headlines in the paper, you know, we're all trying to rip people off and gouge them. And yes, there's been practices that have been really bad in the energy sector, but none of those CEOs or MDs are sitting around the table saying, how can we make sure we rip people off, or how can we make sure we treat them really badly through this crisis? I mean, the energy industry has leaned in and goodwilled so much to customers, which is just so heartening to see. And I think that's sort of my great hope out of this, is that some of those good stories get shared and actually make it to the top, because we're kind of in this world of doom and gloom. Like, who wants to turn on the news? Like, everything's just so depressing. And it's a lot of focus on what everyone's done wrong and not a lot of focus on what everyone's done right. And we actually get things right most of the time. It's just once in a time we don't, and it just shadows over everything. And I think that's genuinely true for many organisations. And it's almost like we've become afraid to talk about the good things that we do, or the good news stories. So that's a theme that I think, not really a theme, but it's just an observation that I have, and I guess a hope that at the end of this, that we might actually learn something as a society around celebrating some of the wins and talking about, you know, every conversation should start with what's gone right for us today, or, you know, what should we be winning, what should we be celebrating as a win, just to get us more into that positive, progressive mindsets that I think at the moment people are probably struggling with.
I think it's a massive theme, actually, because it's that we are hungry for optimism right now.
Yeah.
That is it. People need it. We need some of those stories, and you're absolutely right. You know, we could talk about that till we're blue in the face.
Yeah.
We're not going to get that from the media, but it's like, if you're thinking about what we want to see, or what you want to see with more from leaders, is how can leaders actually role model more of sharing those optimistic stories. And even an example that you've given there of how you're doing that at Momentum by bringing people in with you know, the what was it called? Quarantining?
Oh, the quarantine.
Quarantine. Sorry. Quarantine. So,
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, quarantine as well is a great example of that, you know, bringing people in to be involved in that so that you're part of it as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's, you know, and there's a way to do it that's humble. Like, you know, I get it. Kiwis, Australians, we're the same. We hate it. We hate, you know, somebody who bloody blows their own trumpet too loudly. We sort of get a bit sensitive about that. But there is a way you can actually get that story out there. And I think we've got to make more of an effort with some of that stuff.
Yeah. To give Victor Patron is a great leader as well, does a lot of something called started the Centre for Optimism, purely about some of that stuff. So it's really cool. I want to go into, we've talked about some seriously concrete examples of what you're doing as a leader right now, what you want to see, what is happening, some reflection. Can we go back a bit? You talked about the Amy Childs style of leadership. Where has this come from? Tell us about your life. Who is Amy Childs?
Well, it's very, very evident by the very subtle Kiwi accent you can hear on the line that I was born in New Zealand. But actually, a lot of people don't appreciate, actually, I fluently speak Spanish. So if I spoke to you in Spanish right now, you would not know that I could speak English. So
give us a little bit.
¿Qué quieres que te hable en castellano? Which means, would you like me to speak to you in Spanish?
Beautiful.
But you know, my mum and my dad were amazing people. So they both Kiwis. My dad was a farmer and my mum was a school teacher. And in 1987, they decided to move 3 children under the age of 4 to Chile in South America. And, you know, when people ask me sort of that, they sort of look at me and go, what do you mean? Like, were they Chilean? I said, no, they weren't. They were both Kiwis. They spoke no Spanish. And you know, they had their life savings, which wasn't huge, and they took 3 kids there on an adventure. And my dad was a big visionary, so he had this great big vision around, he wanted to go farming in Chile. He thought there was great opportunity there. The share market had crashed in 1987, so he was off to make his fortune there. And so I had this sort of very rich childhood where you know, these little adventurers sort of went off, and as you do as a child, you just kind of roll with the punches. It's sort of, this is what your normal life's like. And it's not really till I'm now, you know, in my mid 30s, we call it, that I kind of now realize the enormity of that in terms of how that's impacted me in terms of the person I am and also my leadership style. And, you know, examples of that, I mean, the resilience of my parents to go to the unknown. I mean, I remember my grandmother saying, oh, you're going to get killed. I mean, Pinochet was running Chile when they moved there. And for those that know their South American history, that was a pretty dicey time to think that was a good time to go. But, you know, they worked really hard, bought a farm and sort of pioneered New Zealand style dairy farming in Chile. And, you know, my dad sort of became a bit of a local legend. And unfortunately, when I was 16, he passed away. He got cancer, and so that sort of had a big impact on my family dynamics in my life, because I had to grow up very quickly. I was the eldest in my family. I've got two younger brothers, and they, you know, I sort of became kind of mum to them, while my mum had to sort of step into this role of running my dad's, you know, their farm, which was quite a big dairy business by then. And, you know, my mum's tiny. I mean, she's 47 kilos. She's 5 foot, you know, 5 foot something. She's a little pocket rocket. And, you know, Chile was very, at the time, was very male dominated. Women were kind of not treated in the same way as men. And she'd turn up to farm meetings and it would be her and 480 blokes, you know. So, you know, huge role model for me in terms of just this resilience to get on and get things done and push forward. And so that's sort of where that kind of hard work comes from, both from my parents. But also, you know, I had to grow up very quickly. You know, South America is, it's a whole different ball game. You're far more socially aware of inequality in people. So, you know, particular things in my childhood, like I'd go to my friends' houses after school, and a lot of them had maids, you know, people in the house to help, and there was a maid for the cleaning and a maid for the cooking and a maid to look after the children. And just watching some of my friends' mothers and how they treated those people, it was just so unfair, like treated them really poorly. And that's not their fault. They just didn't have the education or the social awareness that's that's just not how we do things in our kind of corner of the world.
Yeah.
And that's massively shaped me in terms of my fairness. And I can't stand that brand of leadership where the boss won't talk to the person who, you know, delivers the mail in the office, or can't even acknowledge the cleaner, or is too proud to stack the dishwasher. Like, I can't stand any of that. So for me, if it's good for you, it's good for me, and I will muck in and do what's required. And that's sort of really come from that kind of what I observed in that culture. And then the second piece of it is, you know, my parents sent me to boarding school when I was 13. So I flew out to New Zealand. They dropped me off, left me at boarding school, and flew back to Chile. And people are quite shocked by that. They're sort of like, what do you mean? And in those days, you didn't fly to Chile direct. You sort of had to stop on the way. So I used to do stopovers in Buenos Aires in Argentina, or I used to do stopovers on Easter Island and Tahiti on the way sort of to New Zealand and back again, sort of between Chile and New Zealand. And yeah, I did that from when I was 13. And like, I look at that now and go, my mother was just so brave to let me do that. But I've been, my whole life, I've been almost like the age I am now since the age I was 4. Like, when I was 13, I was basically 30. So I've always been very responsible. And that comes, I think, from that kind of pioneer upbringing, and just, you know, you just have to get on with it. So that's sort of, I think, a huge influence on me and the way I am the way I am.
Yeah, that's a lot of responsibility to shoulder. But I mean, yeah, as you say, like, also amazing role models that have just shown you, you know, what is possible, and to have those, you know, the brave aspirations. Have you always been really ambitious, do you think, as well?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I think I'm not sure if it's ambitious, but it's also a very high standard of myself. And I think that comes from sort of growing up in a world where I felt different. So, you know, I used to go to school in Chile, and I went to a German school. So it was very kind of, the school system over there is either you went to a school that spoke a language, so it's either German, English, or French. I think my parents thought, there's no point sending you to a school where you can speak English because you already speak that. So we'll do the German version instead. So, you know, when I was about 8 or 9, I could speak German as well. I can't speak a word of it now, it's all gone. But I felt very different when I went to school there, because I used to speak to my parents in English in front of the other kids who spoke to their parents in Spanish. So and we kind of developed this weird language, which was Spanglish. So it was a bit of a blend. So my brothers and I, when we're sort of all together, there's just words in English that Spanish does a better job of. So we sort of jump them in. So, you know, our husbands and my husband and my brother's wives are all a bit like, oh gosh, you guys are a bit strange. But that's you know, that kind of that feeling of being different. I then got it when I came to New Zealand, because when I got to New Zealand, it was such a culture shock to go to school there. I mean, people didn't wear shoes, you know. Like, I was like, why, like, Kiwis were wearing bare feet around school, and that's kind of a thing that Kiwis do, but I was just horrified. Whereas in South America, you go to the supermarket and it looks like you're going nightclubbing. I mean, you're all dressed up and you've got the makeup on, and so that was a huge change of pace. It took me a good year to kind of really adjust to that Kiwi style of life. And then I used to go back to Chile every school holidays. So, you know, that sort of was quite unsettling in terms of that feeling of who am I? And so I sort of had to sort of forge my own path and be at peace that the fact that I was different. Yeah. So I never tried to sort of fit into what the norm was. And my husband always says this about me. He goes, you don't have this thing where you're worried about what people are going to say about you. And I think, no, I don't worry, because, you know, I can be polarizing, but I don't carry that worry about people liking me or not liking me. And I think it is because of that, because I've just had to forge my own path.
Very, very handy one to have as well, especially when you're leading large teams. Sometimes not even a lot of time to have that and I think as well. Yeah. What would you tell that kid if you could, like, from what you know now, what would you tell her?
Oh, so many things. One is I'd bloody spend more time going skiing in the Andes. That's one thing I got to do when I was at school there, which was just amazing. I'd tell them to go back and do more of that. But probably just to enjoy it more. So I think, the look back on stuff's always great. And when you're in the moment, you forget to enjoy the moment.
Yeah.
And it's something we talk about in my house a lot now, because it's very easy now in the current times to be saying, gosh, everything's just so hard and, this is tough. But there is going to be a day where we'll look back and say, gosh, wasn't that so special? Because it's a little bit like childbirth. You forget all the bad parts of it once you've got the baby. And that's sort of a little bit around the analogy of when things are hard and difficult. It's just remembering and enjoying that. Obviously, I'd love to have spent more time with my dad. That's another big thing I'd tell that person to really kind of push down. Like, he was a very hard worker, and we should have demanded, the family demanded more time of him. So those are all the things, if you go back in time, you'd push harder for. But, it was such an amazing forming experience for me. And my goal for my 40th, which is in 3 years' time, is to take my boys there and do a big South America chili feast for as long as we possibly can. So
yeah,
I know, so it'll be good.
I love it. A little bit of advice that you've given there to your younger one is also, I think, good sage advice even for now. Enjoy. There are little nuggets of sort of some beautiful things right now of the connection and stuff that we've got with the people around us that, just taking that as a little piece of advice. Yeah. We've talked a bit about, your reflections of what's going on at the moment, leadership, your own. What about like gazing into even future? Like, what are some of the things that you're obviously not done yet. You're super accomplished leader, Doogie Howser for your age already. So no doubt there's some pretty incredible years coming for you as well. Like, what is the sort of impact you want to have? What is the legacy you want to have? Let's just focus on that for us for a bit. Yeah,
sure. I think for me, impact is kind of everything. And I think, a little bit about my, my South American upbringing, like, my dad had such a big impact on the community he worked in, and he transformed the way people farmed the land. Like, that's his legacy. And so as children of that, you kind of have this thing on you, like, well, what legacy do I want to leave? So I give that a lot of thought. For me, it's around, I really want to get the balance. I want to be a role model of leadership around the balance between you can have a really awesome culture and a really amazing organization and perform at the highest level. And you can do that regardless. Like, people kind of go, you got to be a tech startup, or you need to be this, you don't. You can actually renovate what you've got and you can transform it. Like, I love a transformation. And for me, that's sort of what I want, my impact to be. It's not on a global scale or I'm gonna change the world and how people are led. For me, the impact's more on, if people can look back on me as their leader and say, Amy Childs did something for me when I worked for her that has changed the course of my life. I'm like, bang, that's actually my purpose. That's actually what gets me out of bed in the morning. It's the personalized email to me. It's the phone call. It's the text message that says, hey, thanks for giving me a lift up on this thing, or thanks for your advice on this thing. Or that's actually where I get my drive and my kind of get up and go from. It's not about, I'm the person who gets picked for, running the biggest company in the world. So I just want to have that kind of people impact on a bigger scale. So that'll happen, no doubt I'll get, myself into some situation where I run different types of businesses. I don't have any doubt about that. But for me, it's more of that local feeling for people. I never want to be in a spot where I can't have a broad kind of knowledge of everyone that's in the group. And that's what I love about the size of Momentum. It's in that really, it's a bit of a tricky spot because it's just short of 400 folks and everyone knows who I am. And I kind of know who 3/4 of the people are. And there's an occasional one that I know their face, but I'm not quite sure of their name. So, there's that, but that's a good feeling for me. And that sort of really, really drives me. So that's where I want to see it heading for me personally, is just more impact like that. And that story being told, really, that's the most important thing, and that being replicated, because organizations, sure, they need to align to a leader, but it's important that that is almost the knowledge is transferred. So, you know, I do a lot of work with my direct reports to make sure that it's not just me doing it, that they're starting to kind of follow that approach and that thoughtfulness. It's not that hard. It's just being thoughtful.
Yeah.
And so it's almost like, how do you teach somebody to be thoughtful? And it takes time, you know, and people are trained to run organizations in a way that's performance and KPIs and all those things are important. But actually, if you overlay thoughtfulness over the top of it, you get much better results, I think.
That's good advice as well. Can we stay on that a little bit? Because I think talking about that performance plus culture, you know, they're not mutually exclusive. You can have that really inclusive culture, that feeling of belonging, and still be your A players, your high performing teams. What you've mentioned, kind of that thoughtfulness and you having that personal touch. We've heard a bit about your kind of obsession with customer centricity as well. Yeah. You are a bit famous for being happy to pick up the phone for customers. Yeah. What are other ways, you know, for people who are listening or leaders who are listening, they're like, that's what I want to create, big or small company. Yeah. Like, what is Amy's advice to those individuals about doing something? Like, what has really worked for you, do you reckon?
You have to listen and you have to know your people. And it's not just like, don't have a conversation with people that's like, oh, so where do you want to be in 10 years? Like, have a conversation with them like, where do you live? What goes on in your life? Do you have kids? What are their kids' names? Like, know them. And then once you know them, it's actually much easier to then work out how you help them be their full self. So it's taking the time and being interested in that. That's important. That's the thing I'm finding the hardest right now is I spend all my day walking around talking to people. That's actually my job. And I can walk past someone and I can just look at them and I can know that they're off. And then I'll phone them and I'll say, what's going on with you today? I noticed X, Y, Z. And it freaks people out, like, oh God, Amy's ringing me. Oh my God, something's happened. And I'm like, no, I'm just ringing because I noticed that you weren't yourself. Yeah. What's happening for you? And people have confessed all sorts of things to me. I'm getting divorced. I've got this going on. I've got this mental health challenge. I've got, you know, and you have to be willing and ready as a leader to take on that burden and not avoid it. And I think, unfortunately, as we have grown up in the school of management and that you're taught, oh, that's your private life and that's your work life and neither should the two ever meet. And I call bullshit on that. I think you can't distinguish it and the lines are getting blurrier by the minute. I mean, at the moment, we're all living our home lives on screen in front of all of our colleagues. So I think that's the you have to listen and you have to get really hone in your observation skills. You've got to notice things. You've got to notice that someone's, little things like notice that someone's worn the same shirt to work every day. Something's going on for that person. And we, as humans, we tend to judge, oh God, they wore the same shirt every day. Actually, the person's lost their home and they've split up with their partner. So there's more underneath that, and that's going to impact their performance. So as leaders, we have a responsibility to provide them safety because everyone's concerned about financial well-being. So, your first job is to reassure people around that and then give them the space to get themselves right. And once you've done that, you will find that person will probably jump over a cliff for you. And that's what we should be teaching our leaders in the business, is how to really connect and understand where people are at.
And that's lifetime loyalty for that sort of...
Lifetime loyalty. That's right. Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. And something more, like we can actually be friends with people. You can, you know what I mean? Like, we are humans who are designed to have connection. So, it feels good to help each other. And that's what we should spend time doing, because it actually fulfills you. By helping someone else, it helps you. Yeah. And I think for many leaders at the moment, that's the hard thing, because we're all in the same situation. It's actually much easier to help somebody when you're in a more sort of stable situation yourself. When you're in the pits yourself and you're trying to help somebody else, it's really tough. Like, you're having to dig really deep. And so I think a lot of leaders are probably feeling quite tired. I'm feeling very tired, and that's I think is the reason why.
Yeah. I think there's another layer to that as well. It's such an important conversation, especially at the moment, because yes, there's, you know, the psychological strain or emotional strain on leaders themselves, but it's also that the external business pressure as well, isn't it? And I think sometimes there's a bit of reluctance and fear for people to get close to people when there's so much uncertainty. And that feels, I've heard of a couple of leaders, and that kind of made me prick up and it's really unnerved me, thinking like, no, I don't want to be too close to them at the moment because I don't know what's going to happen. You know, there's those sorts of things. And it's like, but that's not, that solution does not serve anybody in, you know, by like keeping a bigger distance from people at a time when we actually need to be getting closer, because you just potentially create even more fear is what I'm getting to. Yeah,
absolutely. And, you know, if you've got to deliver somebody bad news, you'd rather do it from a base of trust than do it from a position of total, and like you just don't know them at all.
Distance.
It's just not, it's not great for either individual involved. Yeah.
So much in here, Amy. Thank you so much for this conversation. We always try to pull out a couple of highlights that, you know, then when we post things on socials. And as you've been talking, I've been scrambling. I think I've got 7 different ones here, which are going to be in the mix. Seriously, so many, I think, amazing, like genuine takeaways. I really want to thank you for being so generous, because they're really
problems.
Yeah, some great reflection, but also some other pieces. Is there also anything that I haven't asked that you really want to add before we wrap up?
I think there was one thing that you were going to ask me, which you said to me when we talked about this. You said to me, what would be something that no one would agree with you on?
Yes.
And this is true. It is true. That's right.
No one agrees with you.
My top tip, and this, you won't need to take this as a takeaway, Fiona, because it's not a takeaway, but my top tip for mindfulness is ironing. I absolutely, so it's a little unknown fact about me, but I love ironing. It's what I do for mindfulness. So some people listen to, you know, Smiley Mind and lots of things like that. Yeah. I don't. I get the ironing board out, the iron, and a big pile of anything that can be ironed in my house, and I iron, and I iron my problems away. So that's my.
I love that.
Yeah. So that just probably discredited everything I've just said, but there you go.
Just like edit that bit up. No. No, I love that. I think it's so, we need those little things, isn't it? I guess, do you know what? I think that's all actually brought you full circle to you opening up, saying your leadership style is about control or elements of that, because there's got to be that kind of control. My husband, Chris, actually does have that as well. When he's like feeling a bit anxious about something, he just has to clean the house from top to toe, which that is the best. That's what you need.
That's a good
handy one. Get that in control. No gold. Thank you so much again. Thank you for everyone who's been live as well. It's just been gorgeous speaking to you this afternoon. And good luck with everything with the team as well. And
thank you.
Can't wait to hear more.
Soon.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Stories.
Alrighty.
See you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.